Lahat ng ating mga OFWs worldwide and overseas Filipinos, Madam President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, to our beloved Speaker, Ferdinand Martin Romualdez, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today to discuss the need to strike a fair balance between aggressive enforcement versus restrictive implementation and abuse of departure formalities and policies in our fight against illegal recruitment and human trafficking, and in respect of our OFW's right to travel and work abroad. Mr. Speaker, illegal recruitment and human trafficking have always been the scourge and bane of our overseas Filipino workers, and the ugly heads of these twin menaces tormenting our OFWs have again reared, as recent incidents show. The ordeal of OFWs forged into a cryptocurrency scam by a mafia in the area, dubbed as the Golden Triangle, hit the headlines and newscasts last year. Initially, recruited online as call center agents or offshore gaming workers, the victims were flown to Thailand and later brought to an undisclosed and remote area in Myanmar. There, they found themselves compelled against their will to scam affluent clients through various messaging apps to engage in fraudulent investments. During the policy dialogue organized by the OFW Party List last February, 3 victims of illegal recruitment who we helped repatriate from Laos and Myanmar attended to narrate their harrowing experience. The victims narrated they were approached by recruiters online. They traveled to Laos and Myanmar through Thailand and were then forced to work as scammers by the syndicate running the area, luring potential victims into cryptocurrency. 2 of the victims were physically mauled by 5 men when they expressed their desire to go home. At the time of the physical assault, 1 of the victims was pregnant. The victims were also electrocuted and starved when they were unable to meet their quota. Mr. Speaker, these unscrupulous human traffickers and illegal recruiters continue to prey on our hapless countrymen who are merely seeking decent employment by sending them to work abroad without proper documentation and protection from the government for their own selfish monetary gains. It is a daring challenge for the government to respond. But what compounds the problem is the unholy connivance of some unscrupulous immigration personnel with illegal recruiters and traffickers, a group that the OFW Party List helped repatriate narrated that they got through immigration easily by paying the personnel of up to 20,000 pesos. Last April 14, 2 female who claimed that they were Muslim pilgrims planning to participate in the Umrah in Saudi Arabia were intercepted while attempting to depart on a flight to Dubai. They later admitted that their documents were fabricated and were instructed by the recruiter whom they met online to pose as Muslims with the help of the immigration personnel escorting them to be able to leave the country. What is the mandate and duty of the Bureau of Immigration? Mr. Speaker, the mandate of the Bureau of Immigration is to enforce and administer alien admission and registration, as well as immigration and citizenship laws. Its mission is to secure the national borders through automated and streamlined immigration system administered by a border control organization exercising a culture of excellence and accountability. One of its specific functions is to monitor the entry and exit of Filipino citizens, including OFWs and Filipino immigrants, in compliance with the Philippine laws and other legal procedures. The Bureau also plays an important role in the enforcement of Republic Act number 9208 as amended, or the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act, being part of the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT, created under the said law, as well as the provisions on illegal recruitment of Republic Act number 8042 as amended, or the Migrant Workers Act, and other applicable special laws. What are the guidelines on departure formalities for international bound passengers? Mr. Speaker, the Bureau of Immigration, in the discharge of its mandate, is empowered through issuances of the Department of Justice to administer and implement policy guidelines, procedures, and requirements in line with its duty to supervise and control the departure and arrival of passengers, including our OFWs and migrant Filipinos at the ports of entry or exit. In point, Memorandum Circular number 036, issued by the Department of Justice in 2015, refers to the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT, revised guidelines on departure formalities for international bound passengers. Under the guidelines, Mr. Speaker, an OFW intending to depart from the country shall undergo a primary inspection where she is required to present the following documents for inspection: A, valid passport, a valid visa in accordance with country-specific advisory from the POEA, now the Department of Migrant Workers, airline or seacraft travel tickets, an overseas employment certificate or OEC duly issued by the DMW. When an OFW is identified by an immigration officer to have doubtful purpose of travel, or the documents submitted are suspected to be fraudulent, tampered, or falsified, the person is reckoned as a potential trafficked person. The OFW shall be recommended for deferred departure and shall be turned over to the Travel Control and Enforcement Unit for secondary inspection. In the secondary inspection, clarificatory questions may be propounded by the immigration officer in relation to the purpose of travel and travel documents presented. Mr. Speaker, specifically, the secondary inspection shall focus on the person's age, educational attainment, financial capability to travel in accordance with the purpose of travel as declared by the passenger, travel history, and the country of destination. The secondary inspection shall not exceed 10 minutes unless extraordinary circumstances require a longer period of inspection. If a human trafficking or illegal recruitment incident or any other illegal activity has been initially determined, the immigration officer shall not clear the OFW for departure and shall execute an affidavit of deferred departure. The passenger's documents shall be turned over to the IACAT Task Force for investigation and case build-up. Otherwise, the passenger or OFW should be allowed to depart the country. Aggressive enforcement versus restrictive implementation and abuse of departure formalities and policies. Mr. Speaker, despite some unscrupulous personnel in the Bureau, we do acknowledge the officials and men of the Bureau of Immigration who are staying true to their mandate for their efforts in combating the twin societal evils of human trafficking and illegal recruitment, particularly in intercepting potential victims at our airports through the aggressive and strict implementation of departure formalities. However, Mr. Speaker, another problem emerges side by side the aggressive enforcement of departure formalities. Some overreaching or abuse may have been or are being committed by some Bureau personnel in the process, resulting in unreasonable offloading of our beloved OFWs. Let us take the case of Ms. Cham Tanteras, who claimed that an immigration officer in the course of a secondary interview asked her irrelevant questions on her December 2022 trip to Israel that took a long time, causing her to miss her flight. Even Bureau of Immigration spokesperson admitted in a CNN Philippines interview that the questions the officers asked were not normal, such as asking for a yearbook and a graduation photo, and on the marital status of the passengers' parents, which are immaterial considering that Ms. Tanteras is not a minor. Unfortunately, payment of damages to her as caused by her missed flight is not within the scope of the Bureau asserts. Another, Mr. Speaker, is the case of seafarer J.C. Maganti, who was offloaded 3 times from his flight to France by an immigration officer who later demanded 150,000 pesos in exchange for escort service so he can finally board his plane. The Bureau confirmed the veracity of the incident and even stated that Mr. Maganti should have been allowed to board the plane on his second try since documents were already complete. In my consultation, Mr. Speaker, with our OFWs, they have been often complained of being offloaded despite having all the necessary documents. Some also have relatives who have been offloaded who only wish to travel overseas to meet them temporarily. Worse, some crook immigration personnel allegedly demand for amounts ranging from 15,000 to 200,000 pesos from our departing OFWs under the threat of being offloaded again for no valid reason. I have previously written our officials in the Bureau of Immigration calling their attention to these alleged incidents in the name of fairness and due process. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the problem persists. The Bureau is seemingly failing in professionalizing and cleansing its ranks. Who are the end losers, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Tanteras does express, I know that it is part of their protocols and it is their way of protecting me against human trafficking and scams. But to what extent? To our expense. Offloading at the immigration makes OFWs spend more, especially if they have to rebook their tickets and other reservations made, or book a new flight and reservations altogether, Mr. Speaker. On a broader perspective, the frequent offloading at the country's airports of our beloved OFWs suspected of being undocumented recruits or trafficking victims is turning off foreign employers to the point that they have stopped hiring Filipinos and have turned to other countries for their labor needs, thus affecting our economy through lost potential employment and remittances. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, these unreasonable restrictions or their abusive implementation violates OFW's right to travel and work abroad and could serve as windows of opportunities for bribery and corruption. After Ms. Tanteras' case went viral on social media, the Bureau of Immigration issued a public apology, but emphasized that the issues of human trafficking and illegal recruitment are real and are happening every day. We absolutely agree, Mr. Speaker. But again, we need to strike a fair balance between aggressive enforcement versus restrictive implementation and abuse of departure formalities in our fight against illegal recruitment and human trafficking, and in respect of our OFW's right to travel and work abroad. To achieve this balance, if I may, Mr. Speaker, reforms in the Bureau are in order. Specifically, the Bureau should, number one, address conflicting policies and guidelines from a realistic and balanced perspective between effective enforcement and respect for human rights. Two, improve the merit and disciplinary schemes to attract the best people and weed out the bad elements from the institution. Three, Mr. Speaker, conduct continuous training for personnel to enhance professionalism and strengthen the institution's enforcement and implementation capabilities. Four, finalize the revision of guidelines on departure formalities for international bound Filipino passengers with thorough consultation with overseas Filipino workers. For our part, Mr. Speaker, I enjoin our colleagues to support the passage of a new Philippine immigration law. In parting, though, I would like to remind the Bureau of the oft-quoted cliche that too much of anything is bad, and it's going to hurt. You may wish to cure the illness with the best of medicines, but an overdose can also kill. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues, tandaan po natin ang ating mga OFW, sila po ang bida. Maraming salamat po sa inyong suporta. God bless us all. Congresswoman Marissa delmar Magsino.
Please share, like, subscribe, and comment sa aking channel para updated ka lagi sa kaganapan sa loob at labas ng ating bansa. Hanggang sa muli, magandang araw Pilipinas!